Friends, a few days back, I visited my friend's house, and while discussing a large number of issues, he asked me that which newspaper should he read. He was aware of the fact that I have studied journalism, I have worked in media for a long time, and a journalist, he was seeking my expert opinion. I replied to him that he should read different newspapers, and if possible, he should read newspapers published in multiple languages. Now, I am discussing this issue with you because I find this question very, very relevant and very important. Let me also share with you a personal experience which is very much related to this topic. Couple of years back, I was studying in Jamia Millia Islamia, and I went to attend a public meeting in Delhi, and the public meeting was held in Rajendra Bhavan, which is very close to Gandhi Peace Foundation at ITO New Delhi. And once the public meeting was over, I got an opportunity to interact with eminent writer Arundhati Roy. I was very young at that time, and I had a lot of questions, and I asked one questions after another. Later, she gave me lift, and I got another opportunity, more time to interact with her. And during our conversation, when I was sitting in Arundhati Rai's car, she told me, and I remember her statement even today. She said that reading newspaper is a very critical thing, and people should learn how to read newspaper. I didn't understand the gravity of the statement at that time, but as time passes, I realize that how profound she made this statement. Friends, couple of years back, I wrote weekly articles for countercurrent, and for almost 8 to 10 months I read newspapers in three languages: English, Urdu, and Hindi, and I was able to write pieces analyzing the content news and views of Urdu newspapers, Hindi newspapers, English newspaper, and I wrote those stories for countercurrent. Those stories are still available on internet. You can Google it and find it. And during the course of reading multiple newspaper in a week, I learnt many things, and I would like to share my experience with you and those young journalists, those young students who are studying journalism. I think that my experience may be useful to them, and also my experience can help students who are studying representation and the way media is playing an important role in bringing some issues as the key concern of nation and overlooking and downplaying other issues as being insignificant. So the point which I am here trying to say that whatever is presented to us which is called significant is not significant in itself. What is being dismissed as very small issue are not small, but they are presented to us by media, by other means of mass communications, and our understanding, our views, our opinions are very much shaped by the way media is reporting or writing issues. Friends, opposition parties have alleged that media in this country are not serious, sincere, and honest in reporting people's issues. On the other hand, media is busy presenting the views of the establishment as the views of the nation. So the opposition party believes that if media starts playing critical role, if it becomes free and fair, things would change a lot, and an establishment would fear bringing in anti people policies. Now it is up to you to decide how media is covering the issue, and I know that many people would agree and disagree on this point. So right now we will leave this issue here. My main concern is media and its representation, and this is very much linked with the questions of my friend who asked me which newspaper he should read. And let me again go back to the this question and trying to find out some possible answers or explanations. As a journalist, as a student of media journalism, I feel that newspaper has its own perspective, its own understanding, its own biases in presenting news and views. Friends, generally it is believed that a newspaper should factually report and should try to present all sides of the story, and when it comes to writing opinion pieces, editorial, it is free to take any side. I think this distinctions between news and views is very important, and in today's time the wall between news and views has been very much eroded, and news is presented as opinionated views. The classical understanding of journalism is that news should be sacrosanct and views can be personal. Let me give you example. If something has happened, as a journalist, one should try to report the event as it happened. A journalist should try to report what has happened, when something has happened, and where it has happened. So, what, when, and where are important elements of news. There are other two elements which are more critical: why the event has happened and how the event has happened. So, why and how, these are very crucial parts of news. And the sad part of most of news stories today is that newspapers or media, they are interested in giving you news, but they have very little time to explain to you why and how aspects of the news. So I would like to give you the example of Hindi newspaper. If you open Hindi newspaper, a story would be very small, okay, very small story. In one page you could get 20 stories. What will be given, how will be given, what will be given, where will be given, when will be given, but how and why, these two issues are left untouched. And when these two issues are touched, it is touched from a particular point of view. As far as news is concerned, the ethics of journalism demands that multiple accounts, multiple narrations, multiple versions, multiple shades of truth should be incorporated in news. For example, if farmers have protested at, let's say, Jantar Mantar, and police has beaten them with, let's say, lathi, or if lathi charge was ordered, we see that in newspaper what angle is covered, what has happened. So lathi charge has happened. When the lathi charge happened, let's say on Sunday lathi charge had happened. Where the lathi charge has happened? The lathi charge has happened at Jantar Mantar in New Delhi. So these three aspects are almost or mostly covered by the newspapers. But the remaining two elements, which are why the lathi charge happened and how the lathi charge happened, these are very critical issues, and most of the newspapers either they do not touch these how and where questions, and if they touch, they primarily report it from establishment point of view. So there is a police versions. The police versions would be that the protesters turned unruly, and that is why they wear lathi charge to maintain law and order. But there is another side of the protesters. The protesters would argue that they have been peacefully protesting and the government was not interested in addressing the issue. To discourage their movement, the state, the establishment has used force, and this use of the force goes against the idea of democracy, and the idea of democracy is all about protest and dissent. If protest is not allowed, if dissent is not allowed, if the government policies is not allowed to be criticized, then democracy gets threatened. Democracy comes under threat, and that is why the protesters have demanded that a proper inquiry should be done and all those people who are responsible for using force should be brought to the book. So this is protesters versions. So a good reporter, a good writer should incorporate both the views, the police views as well as the protesters views. But the sad part of today's reporting is that only the establishment perspective, or if I be more precise, mostly the establishment perspective is presented as the truth. So this is the big problem with news writing. But when it comes to opinion, one is free to have opinion, have his or her view on particular issues. So this is the orthodox classification of news and views, and many journalists have expressed, I think, concern that today these distinctions between news and views is being eroded because the government is putting a lot of pressure on newspapers, on media houses to report events from the perspective of the establishment and to give little space or no space to the opponents of the establishment. That is why even the news is presented in a way that appears to be an opinionated writing. So, news and views distinction is being eroded, and that is a big threat. Having realized, having accepted the fact that news and views are different, but I would like to go a bit further, that even the selections of news is very much determined by the way you look at politics, the way you look at society and economy. There is a concept which is called gatekeeping operation. Reporters write stories, okay, reporters send stories, but editor sitting in newsroom, news editor or chief reporter, they collectively decide which news deserves to be printed on page number 1 and which news should be sent to page number 3 or page number 12. You know it very well that stories printed on page number 1 will be read by most number of the readers, and stories which are published on page number 3 will be spotted by less number of the readers. So the moment an editor has decided to to uh, give a place to a particular story, where it should be published, how big the story should be published, whether picture would be published along with the story. These are all the ways and techniques through which I think the editors undermine a particular story, or editors try to make a small story as a big story. So these are also very critical issues, and that is why I believe very strongly, I believe that even the way news is selected, even the way news is printed, the way the news is placed on a particular page, the way the space is given to a particular news, these are all political acts, and they are not so objective as it is often argued. That a story which is printed, let's say, on page number 1 is not always the most important news of the day in the country. It is the decision of the editor or the newspaper or the editorial team to put a particular news on page number 1 and then to reduce another news to a small space and publish it on page number 12. That so when some let's say activist or leaders belonging to opposition parties, or a students leader, or leaders having, let's say, Dalit Bahujan ideologies, or leaders believing in, let's say, secular ideology, if they are arrested, okay, and if they belong to the marginalized communities, those stories, if they are arrested by the police, I think those stories are published by giving much more space by the Hindi newspaper. But when court gives the decision that in a particular case the police was not right, and when, let's say, the person has been released on bail, the same story is given very less space. So you could understand that when Muslim youths, when they are arrested, let's say, in terror charges, newspapers, generally mainstream newspapers, particularly Hindi newspapers, they give it a big coverage. Okay, those stories are printed, I think, in 5 columns, 6 columns, and police version is presented as the only versions. But when those people get out of the jail, let's say after spending many years in jail, then those stories are not published so prominently. So this shows that the newspaper editors have their interest in projecting that those who are arrested by the police have potential to pose threat to the society because they had alleged links with, let's say, antisocial elements. So you could understand that the issues which concerns the, let's say, rich people, they get wider coverage, they get prominent space in the newspaper. Their stories about fashion, cinema, they are given more space in newspapers. But the stories about untouchability, stories about, let's say, political economy, about poverty, about people living in the slums, they are less reported. So the farmer society will attract less attention of the editors than, let's say, the fashion week or maybe the fashion show. So the point which I am trying to make, that the newspapers, I think, and the editors, they are, even if they are objective, they claim to be objective, they cannot be objective, because the way the newspaper is founded, the way the newspaper is run, the way the newspaper is being funded, they all determine its contents, its opinion. So truth cannot be one. Truth is not there outside that one could go and one could find it out. Then what is the way out? Should readers stop reading the newspaper? Do I mean to say this? No, I am not saying like this. I am not saying that you should stop reading newspaper. I am not saying that you should not watch newspaper. Why? Because there cannot be any space where you could get 100% pure air. Air will be polluted less or more. Okay, water which we drink is not pure all the time. So if water and air is not 100% pure, then my argument is not that we should stop drinking water or we should stop breathing, but my point is that let's reduce the impurity. Okay, let's filter the water. Okay, let's put a curb on, let's say, carbon emissions to make air more pure. Let's plant more trees. Okay, let's protect environment. This would be the argument. Pollution cannot be 100% done away with. Pollution will exist, but we have to bring pollution to the minimum. So in the same way, I will give you some suggestions here that how we should try to overcome, how we should try to get better understanding of any story, how we should not get easily trapped by the newspapers, by the media, how we get more information, better information, critical informations. So I would like to share some of my views. Friends, one thing I always do, I do not read one newspaper. I do not read one newspaper. I buy multiple newspapers. So the first thing you should do is to read multiple newspapers. Okay, you should read news. You should get news from multiple sources. Okay, so if you get multiple sources, then you get larger picture of something. You get conflicting views, and when you get conflicting views, then there are brighter chance that you get close to truth. So as a journalist, I believe, and when I teach young students, I always tell young journalists that when you go to write a story, the best thing you can do is to bring in all voices within the story. But in today's reporting, multiple voices are being erased and one voice is presented as the truth. So when one voice is being presented as one truth, in these circumstances, our responsibility is to get multiple news, to get news from multiple sources, to consume news from multiple angles, multiple perspectives, so that one kind of a story, one kind of truth should not completely make our thinking closed. So I'll give you one example. The same story is represented in Hindi newspaper in one way. The same story is represented in English newspaper in another way, and in Urdu newspaper in different way. And I could only read Hindi, English and Urdu newspaper. I cannot read, let's say, Bangla newspaper or Tamil newspaper or Malayalam newspaper or maybe Telugu newspaper, Assamese newspaper, French newspaper, German newspaper, Arabic newspaper, Persian newspaper. So if you read papers in different languages, then you will get very different stories, very different explanations, very different treatment of the same story, because language creates a different field, language creates a different worldview. So I would give you one example. There is a issue, let's say any issue you could take. Let's take the example of, let's say, the way minorities are being, let's say, discriminated in this country. So if you read Urdu newspapers, you will find that the story related to minority discriminations, okay, the story related to, let's say, vegetarian communalism, the story related to the need to promote secularism, social harmony, okay, and let's say pluralism. These stories would be very much there. These stories would be given much more prominence in the newspaper, Urdu newspaper. But if you look at Hindi newspapers, you will find that stories related to, let's say, majority sentiment, let's say, nationalist, I should say communal nationalism, stories promoting communal nationalism, maybe Mediterranean nationalism, they will very much influence the way newspaper reportings or opinions are being written. Okay, English newspaper would try to maintain some kind of liberal voice. So when it comes to, let's say, civil rights or political rights, they will appear more democratic. But when it comes to, let's say, economic policy, then they will support more free market instead of socialist and left oriented policies. So we could see very much that the same issues could be, let's say, presented in a very different way. Even the reservations issue, when even the reservations issue would not be much supported by, let's say, Hindi newspaper or English newspaper. And when I say Hindi newspapers, I would mean to say that the general trend, I think the general trend would not support, I think, reservations for the marginalized community. Okay, and if you and to support my argument, I'll give you the example of, let's say, OBC reservations. When the OBC reservation was implemented, let's say in 1990, when BP Singh government was there, most of the newspapers, mainstream newspapers, I think, they opposed reservations and they wrote against the Social Justice Party. And we have also seen a similar trend when during 2007 when or 6, when I think when the UPA came to power, and when Arjun Singh was the HRD minister, education minister, and when OBC reservations was implemented in educational institutes of the maintained by the central university. At that time, the newspaper also played a role against the reservation. So we could see it that the majority the majority in these countries are Dalits, the Bahujan, let's say the Adivasis. When it comes to the newspaper, they would often tend to promote the interest of the minority, upper caste and upper classes. And when it comes to, let's say, the issues of nationalism and security, they will often follow the establishment line. So the point which I am trying to say, that newspaper should be read not as a sacred document. This is my key argument. The newspaper reports or maybe media reports should not be read as a sacred documents, but readers should try to look at news and views from multiple sources. Okay, and if possible, one should try to read different newspapers and try to compare it, that why some news are given, let's say, prominent space on page number 1, but another newspapers have brought in different kinds of newspaper, and why some newspapers are on page number 1 on all the newspapers. So the point is that the very distinction about national news, regional news, local news, I think they are very much determined by the news team, determined by the editorial board. So now again go back to my friend's question who asked me which newspaper is to read, and my argument would be very simple, 2-3 points before I end this discussion, that Never think that newspaper is a sacred document. Never completely rely on one source of the newspaper. Always read newspaper from multiple sources. Try to read newspapers in multiple languages, and try to connect whatever is written in news with your own experience, with your own reading, with your own surroundings. If newspapers opinion pieces give you the picture that economy is doing very well, but when you go out in the market and you have to pay a lot of money to buy goods, I think, and when petrol and diesel prices are up, and when employment is going high, when you do not get job, when university and colleges are extracting huge fees for education, then you should not believe in those newspaper, but we should rather give preference to your own experience. So the point which I am trying to say, that okay, of course we cannot go everywhere to see things for ourselves. If I am Delhi and if something has happened, let's say in Calcutta, I cannot go there to see things uh, for myself. So for that matter, we have to rely on the newspaper. But the point which I am trying to say, that if something has happened in Kolkata, read a story in Hindi, in Bangla, in English, in multiple newspapers of multiple languages. Okay, read civil societies activist report, read let's say how the locals are arguing, even go through social media. So the point is that look at multiple sources of the news, and also use your experience, what you think about it, whether the way the things are being reported, does it make any sense to you or not. Suppose in newspaper or in let's say in any TV show, if Hindu and Muslim conflict is being shown to be the real problem in this country, you have to also keep you have to also ask this question: is communal issue the big issue, or poverty is big issue? Is Hindu Muslim tension is a big issue, or unemployment is a big issue? Whether temple construction and reconstruction or renaming of, let's say, cities are bigger issues, or unemployment, health, public health, if they are big issues. So do not completely rely, do not look at newspaper uncritically. Any reading, any act of reading should be a creative job, should be a critical job. Do not become a passive, I think, reader. Do not read something as if that it is a gospel truth. Okay, it is do not treat newspaper writing as a scripture. Do not think that whatever anchors are saying, these are all sermons given by, let's say, angels and gods. I think journalists are very much human beings. Journalists are paid salaries by the newspapers. Journalists are, in some cases and in many cases, they are working under political pressures. So the point which I am trying to again repeat it is that read multiple sources of the news, read multiple newspapers, look at multiple sources of their stories, and in any story, look for contradictions, look for different explanation, use your own experience, read your own reading, and do not stop at just looking at what has happened, but try to analyze it. And the sad part of today's journalism is that good reporters are dying. I think reportings are being done from the newsroom, and I think agenda is set before a reporter goes out to report something. So what is happening, that we do not go deep into the story, and the worst part is that what is being told, where is being told, when is being told, but how and why are not being told. If fire has occurred, let's say today at 6 in the evening in slum, the newspaper would be very much in a hurry to report that fire has occurred. So what has been explained, where it has happened? So it has happened in a slum in Delhi. when ha- when has it happened? It has happened today at 6 p.m. But how it has happened, why it has happened, those issues are being completely missed out. So we know it very well that newspapers and medias, they are working under pressure, I think, and it is very sad part of the media today that India is considered as the largest democracy in this world. It has a big legacy of, let's say democracy, and even our freedom fighters were at the same time journalists. So despite the fact that we have got a very rich and critical tradition of journalism today in India is in very bad state. I think as far as free media index is concerned, India is sitting at the bottom despite the fact that it is a democracy. So media is in fact failing us. Most of the journalists have failed us because they are not looking at people's issues, but they are writing the stories in such a way that they want to please the establishment. So they have failed it, but we will do much damage to our democracy when we start reading their stories and watching their show as if that these are sacred documents and these are gospel's truth. We should not get trapped in those let's say lies, half truths and propaganda. Rather, we should try to bring in pollution to the minimum level. And how to do it? By looking at multiple sources, by looking at different media houses, looking at media from different regions, different languages, and using our own critical brain and going deep into the stories and using our own experience and never forgetting why and how question. This is what I have to say today, and I have shared my experience, whatever I have read, and how I have worked as a journalist and as a teacher, how what I have taught and read. So friends, I share my views on multiple issues, and I hope that it proves useful to you. So please share your views, please comment, and let's learn together. Let's take part in discussion collectively for making this world better and more democratic. So for today, I seek your permission to end this discussion. We will meet once again with a new topic. Till then, I say goodbye. Thank you very much.